I don't know where this is going. I don't know where he's going to end up, and anyone who tells you otherwise is kidding themselves. But it certainly seems like the teams that we've heard mentioned, the Dodgers, the Mets, the Yankees, the Padres, the Rangers, and some others, those are the obvious frontrunners based on...
First inside scoop of 2025. Happy New Year, Ken Rosenthal, and everyone check out Fair Territory. Fresh episode just released yesterday. But Ken, I'd like to talk right away about the topic that I think will dominate the next few weeks, and that is where will Roki Sasaki go? So I wanted to get your thoughts on an update, which I know you mentioned a little bit on yesterday, but also can you mix in your thoughts on the process? How do you think the process has played out so far with the way he's eliminated some teams, met with some teams, and also has his agent, Joel Wolfe, pretty in the public scene about his situation?
First off, to address Joel Wolfe, it seems to me that while he generally is very private, very discreet, he understands the interest in Sasaki and the need to occasionally put out some information. And it seems to me that that is what is driving this. I haven't actually asked him that, why you're going public when you don't ever go public, but it seems to me that's the motivation there. Hey, there's incredible interest in this player for good reason, and he is going to at least release what information he feels is appropriate. As far as the process itself, and I know that it's come out from Joel Wolfe that there have been 20 teams that made contact. Well, there were other teams that wanted to, but were just told, hey, don't bother. You'll be wasting your time. It's not like there were 10 teams that were not interested. Every team was interested. The maximum this guy's going to get is something like $7 million. So any team can afford him. As far as where we are now, yes, there are teams that have been identified as the leaders, the ones that have met with Sasaki. And then there are teams that seemingly want to get a place at the table and have been unable to. The Red Sox and Phillies come to mind there. I don't know where this is going. I don't know where he's going to end up, and anyone who tells you otherwise is kidding themselves. But it certainly seems like the teams that we've heard mentioned, the Dodgers, the Mets, the Yankees, the Padres, the Rangers, and some others, those are the obvious frontrunners based on simply the fact that they have met with Sasaki and other teams have not.
So let me ask you this here. We've talked about this over Burnes going to the Diamondbacks, and you've explained that a lot of players do come through and ask about the Diamondbacks. And I found that very, surprising a little bit because you don't hear them signing too many big name guys. Can you just go and dive deep into that a little bit and explain, why some guys always check in on them?
Right, Todd. And this is what I wrote about today in The Athletic. And it's an interesting thing that I really didn't have much of a feel for myself. Essentially, a lot of players live in Arizona. You guys know that. There are players who end up with teams that train in Arizona and wind up living in the Phoenix area. And those players have a natural inclination to want to stay home and play for the Diamondbacks. And there's an added motivation, actually a couple. But the big one is this team, the Arizona Diamondbacks, is the only team to train in the spring in the same city in which it plays in the regular season. The Florida teams don't do that. They train like 90 miles away from their home parks, and given the Florida traffic, guys are not generally going to commute. So that's one advantage. The tax situation in Arizona is another advantage, 2.5% state income tax. That's much more favorable than California, for example, for guys making what baseball players make. So you put those things together, the fact that so many players live here, the fact that the team trains and plays here, and the fact that you have a situation with the taxes that are advantageous to players, it all kinds of adds up to a desirable situation for players who live in Arizona.
Any idea why this came together so late? We didn't hear much about the Diamondbacks, but then it came together and bang. Some reports were 2 to 3 days, 3 to 4 days. It came together really quick. Any idea why, or is that just the way that Arizona front office doesn't let things leak out?
No, it's not so much that. They were in contact with Burnes from the beginning, and Burnes, through intermediaries, was contacting their people saying, hey, I've got an interest in playing there. And that is what happens quite often with players who either live in Arizona or want to play in Arizona. So there was contact, but initially the feeling among the Diamondbacks people, from what I understand, is that it was not going to be easy to pull off. It was going to be out of their comfort level financially. And once Burnes lingered on the market, then the Diamondbacks felt, okay, maybe we have a chance. The perception within the industry was that Burnes certainly wanted to play out west. And the Diamondbacks jumped in right around Christmas, and it did come together rather quickly from that point on. But it wasn't like they came totally out of nowhere. It seems like it because nobody reported interest in the Diamondbacks and Burnes. But at the same time, once it started, it did actually transpire rather fast. Now, I want to say one thing, and you guys have heard me say this before, and I said this on Fair Territory yesterday. I always mention at free agent time, even at trade time, things will come out of nowhere. Things will happen that just absolutely stun us and kind of give us whiplash. You're craning your neck trying to figure out what the heck just happened. This was a classic case of that. And it reminded me, frankly, of the Greinke situation 9 years ago when the Diamondbacks signed him. Now, that was different. That was a situation, Eric, where the Diamondbacks just jumped in right at the end. This wasn't quite that, but certainly none of us in the reporting world had any clue the Diamondbacks were of a mind to get this kind of thing done.
Is that fun for you when there's something that like comes out of nowhere? Because you're working a lot of different people, talking to different people. You're hoping for. Is that fun when like something comes out of nowhere and you're like, "Whoa, that was awesome."
It is fun, and honestly, it's more fun when I have an inkling and can report ahead of it, like I did with Greinke all those years ago. I had a little bit of a heads up on that one, but this one, no. And it is fun because, okay, we all look stupid for not knowing this in advance, right? You can make that case, and a lot of people like to make that case that reporters are stupid. But the fact of the matter is, these things are unpredictable, and things do happen that, again, come out of nowhere. And I joked about this yesterday on Fair Territory. People sometimes get on us when we mention mystery teams, right? And I understand that. If you are talking about a mystery team, name the team. And that's why I generally don't do it. But quite often there are mystery teams. And the longer these things linger, as it did with Burnes and as it is doing right now with Pete Alonso and Alex Bregman, the greater it seems the chance is of a surprise occurring. It doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes it just plays out the way it probably should play out. For instance, if Alonso goes back to the Mets. But there are occasions, and this was one of them with Burnes, where it just totally shocks the entire baseball world.
Ken, you could just tweet out mystery team with nothing. Just the whole tweet would just be mystery team, and you would put Twitter in a frenzy. But don't do that. I know you have more integrity than that. But with the Diamondbacks, is this the end for Zac Gallen as a Diamondback?
It might have been the end anyway, Eric. And let's face it, he is a Scott Boras client. He is entering his walk year. The chances of him signing an extension were minimal, maybe 5%, if that. And the likelihood that he goes to free agency and gets a monster deal, yeah, that's probably going to happen. Now, maybe Zac Gallen is like Corbin Burnes and wants to stay in the Phoenix area. It's certainly possible, right? But yes, it could certainly mean that Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Jordan Montgomery, the three potential free agents in their rotation, are not back. And one of the reasons for the Diamondbacks to sign Burnes and get that minimum two-year commitment before the opt-out was to protect themselves in the event that Gallen leaves after this season. At least they've got Burnes next year, along with right now Brandon Pfaadt and some others, Ryan Nelson. And then they can kind of piece it back together if they don't re-sign any of the other pitchers. They'll also have Eduardo Rodriguez beyond this season.
And also, let's remember, Zac Gallen likes to keep receipts on who votes for him for things, on how the Cardinals treated him, all that. So I am excited to see what he brings to the table when they just brought in another starter. He's a Jersey guy. I love Gallen, but
South Jersey, Tom,
he's
is that okay with you?
No, I don't mind South Jersey. I don't mind it. It's
right,
in the boonies.
just checking.
It's the boonies, but I don't mind it. We're good.
Todd's pretty far south. He's not South Jersey, but you're pretty far south down there in Tom's River. All right, Ken, let me go back to Roki Sasaki for a moment because we have a fan question, and I think it's a good point to actually dive into some of the details of what Joel Wolf, his representation over at Wasserman, actually talked about. Carl said, do you really think that Roki wants to play in a smaller city, or is that just put out there to stoke the market? So, that was put out there. Not having players involved in the process right now, current players on teams, was put out there. And Ken, I'm no Ken, but I was in Japan and I met with some people out there at some business meetings. So of course I asked everyone about Roki, and they gave me two things to keep in mind. They said, one, he's very young and mentors are important. So they said, don't overlook the fact that he'll want to be with a mentor. That immediately takes you to Ohtani, Yamamoto, and Darvish. And two, which I'm experiencing right now as I'm in a pit stop in Hawaii, it is so freaking far to go from Japan to the East Coast. And this guy's not rich. He's not going to be rich. He can't pay for a private plane right off the jump like some of the other guys do, pay a couple $100,000 to fly their fam. So anyway, just throwing that out there.
Good question by Carl. First of all, good points by you, Scott, as well. And no one really knows what is driving Sasaki. The small market thing came from, I believe, Joel Wolf saying, listen, he's not ruling that out. He's looking for teams that develop pitching well, and some of the small market teams, Cleveland and Tampa Bay in particular, excel at that. So I don't know where they stand in the process, those two clubs, but they would seem to be the kinds of teams that maybe could make it work. Now, do they have the mentor? Do they have the proximity to Japan? No, they don't. And that is why all along, as you mentioned, Scott, people have perceived that the Dodgers with their Japanese contingent and the Padres with Darvish, who is like the godfather of all Japanese players, they are going to be the most likely destinations for Sasaki. And maybe it turns out that way. But again, I don't know that we can rule anything out. Going back to Ohtani all those years ago, I don't remember the Angels being a particular front runner there. And I don't see them that way, or I didn't see them that way then. So when we talk about teams now, could he go to Texas? Could he go to Chicago with the Cubs? I think anything is possible, but if in the end he chooses the Dodgers or Padres, we'll then say, well, of course, these were the obvious choices all along. But we don't know that right now. We don't know that for a fact.
Let me ask you about Pete Alonso a little bit. We've talked a little bit about him. He's probably the most notable guy right now, in my opinion, that has not gotten picked up. I know there's the holidays. I know the lull happens. That's never stopped anybody. But, of course, where do you see the traction going with him? I know we brought up a couple teams, but I'd like to hear your opinion on this whole situation about Pistol Pete.
Todd, I still see the Mets as the logical place here. And you're going to hear about other teams, the Angels, the Giants, whatever. I don't know that any of those are that real. Could turn out that way. I'm not going to rule it out. We just saw a big surprise happen with Burnes. Maybe one of those other teams, the Angels, the Giants, someone else steps up and decides, okay, we want Pete to be on our team. But the Mets are the team that developed him, the team that has thrived with him, a team that understands or should understand that he has proven he can play in the New York market, which not every player can. Todd, you could do it. Not every player could do it. So those things weigh in his favor, in my opinion, and the fact that he has rare power, that weighs in his favor. The issue seems to be with the Mets, and perhaps other teams as well, is that Alonso is entering his 30s. He's not a particularly athletic guy, though he works really hard at his defense, and you don't necessarily want to commit, as David Stearns, president of baseball operations of the New York Mets, that long a deal to a player with that profile. We all get it. And we all understand why there might be some hesitation and reluctance on the part of teams, but it sometimes gets to the point with free agents where we're looking at the negatives much more than the positives. And you tell me how many guys in this game hit with the kind of power that Pete Alonso possesses. So, does he deserve a 6-year, $300 million deal? No, he does not. Does he deserve a 6-year deal at all? Maybe you can make that case. No. But if it ends up shorter, then the AAV will be high, I would expect. And if he gets the highest AAV for a first baseman, which currently is 27, I believe, Freddie Freeman, that to me would be a win for Pete Alonso, even if the deal is not as long as he would like. So I'm sort of making a concession speech for him here, and maybe I shouldn't be, but yeah. At the same time, there are all kinds of ways to look at this. And if he gets a 3 or 4 year deal from the Mets with opt-outs and that high AAV, I see no problem with that. Even though they offered him more in the past, that was when he was still in arbitration. I see no problem with that kind of deal for Alonso.
Ken, I'll flip it to Bregman. So the three teams we talked about at the top of the show were the Tigers. Definitely, they have a spot for him. Seems like they're interested. The AJ Hinch connection. Seems like the Blue Jays want to spend some money somewhere. And then the Red Sox are a little more of a unique fit. But what do you think about those three, or anything else that has to do with his market right now, which is also moving slow, maybe because he had some peripherals that some teams are scared of. Walk rate down, teams attacking him more, stuff like that.
I'm not sure beyond those three teams who else might be interested. I don't know that there are any other teams that are that serious. Those are the ones that stand out. They're the most obvious. Detroit, they are an obvious fit, but they've got a young third baseman coming, Young, and Jace Young, Josh's younger brother. And they have been very adamant about not blocking the paths of their younger players. Now, at some point, you need veterans too. And we talk about this all the time on this show. You can't just win with young guys. You can't just worry about their paths all the time. Sometimes you block their path, and maybe you make a trade of that younger player to supplement you somewhere else. You can do that, So Detroit this offseason so far, 2 one-year, $15 million contracts. One for Alex Cobb, one for Gleyber Torres. We have yet to see this GM, Scott Harris, or this owner, Chris Ilitch, step out in a big way. Actually, Ilitch, I believe, was the owner when they did the Javier Baez deal. So he did it. And maybe that's one reason they're so reluctant. They don't want to get stuck with another bad deal. I get it. At the same time, they had a magical year last year. And it's time for a team like that, I wrote this in September, to step up. The Blue Jays, yes, as you mentioned, Scott, they want to spend on someone, whether it's Santander or Bregman, someone else. They're involved in really every market, bullpen market, starting pitching market. They're trying to be opportunistic, but they have been itching to go here. So that's a place or a team that seemingly would pay Bregman, perhaps what he wanted, but does he want to go to Toronto? And it's not Canada that players oppose. It's not Toronto that players oppose. It's one of the great cities in the world. It's the Blue Jays situation. Their lack of farm system, their problematic situations with Guerrero and Bichette both being free agents after this year, that is what is turning off guys. It's not the city or the country. It's more the state of the team. We've seen free agents sign with the Blue Jays before. It's not out of the question. And then there are the Red Sox, and their motivations here are difficult to discern. Bregman, to me, is an obvious fit. Most likely would be at second base with the Red Sox, but he also could play third. You could move Devers, make him and Cassis perhaps a DH first base combination. But are the Red Sox willing to spend on an Alex Bregman? That remains to be seen. To me, he is the perfect fit. Right-handed bat, that's something they desperately need. A leader for their younger players, something they could use as well. But we have not seen the Red Sox, the full-throttle Red Sox, really step out except for moves that were not going to be too burdensome financially. The Garrett Crochet trade financially is great for them. First 2 years at least, or the 2 years that he's under control. Chapman was relatively cheap. They haven't done major things as far as spending. They've made an interesting trade, no doubt, but it's time for them to spend too. And they're in a league right now, the American League, that is weak. The Yankees, the Rangers, maybe the Astros, and I don't know who else. I know Cleveland and Minnesota and perhaps Detroit, they'll all be competitive. We get it. But that league is not like the NL right now. So if you're the Red Sox, or the Blue Jays for that matter, you can maybe do some things and be a real force in 2025. But the question is desire, especially on the part of the Red Sox.
Yeah, I'm with you. Detroit and Boston certainly need to show us a little bit more. Those are big cities. Okay, so let's finish with this. Ken, advice was not taken by you, me, and many others for a little bit of a slowdown during the week between Christmas and New Year's. This was about as active as I've seen it in a minute, with some pretty big names moving through. So I just wanted to, see if you had any rant in you for people to take 1 week out of the 52 per year in a sport that gets more volume and coverage than anywhere else to actually shut it down, not for anything but family members to get some time with their loved ones, like agents, front office execs, etc.
Well, that should happen. It used to happen. There used to be a dark period around Christmas and New Year's, but that changed a few years back. And you're right, Scott, it was very active. And by the way, I forgot to mention Bueller with the Red Sox. That's their other edition. But again, not a big money type of edition. As for the dark week and the sport slowing down, it would benefit everyone's mental health, in my opinion. But whoever the leaders are in this particular regard, and I'm pointing to the commissioner's office, they don't seem inclined to do something along those lines. The union probably would oppose any restriction on the market. So here we are, and it's going to be active. Now, what I do is I shut it down right around the holidays, and I don't return to work until after the new year. That's one of 2 periods in the entire year that I just don't work. And that's my answer to it. I'm not going to work 52 weeks a year. I don't know that that's a reasonable expectation. But as for the sport itself, it is what it is, and it doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon.
No, FT's the same way. We do 1 week where we're like, all right, Christmas to New Year's, maybe that'll be a little slower. And then I'm checking my phone. I'm on vacation in a little bit. I'm like, damn it. But whatever. It is what it is. We're refreshed. Welcome back. Happy New Year, Ken. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. That's the inside scoop. Plus, you've got Fair Territory coming off all of what we just witnessed over the last week and a half or so with Burnes, with some of the other signings like a Jock Peterson, which we covered in the regular show yesterday, Gleyber Torres, etc. So get it wherever you listen to your pods. Also check it out.
Hey everybody, be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.